Good morning, everybody. Thanks a million for the opportunity to be able to present to you today. So I think yesterday, listening to the presentations and even just thinking about all the data that's available on catchments.ie or in all the EPA water quality reports, where we can see we have a lot of information on our environment. We have so much information on the trends in water quality. We've got a good understanding of the pressures that are causing problems. And we're, I suppose, getting more and more data and information on what type of measures that are needed to fix some of the problems. If we were only thinking about the environmental pillar, it would be very easy to decide, well, that activity is causing that problem, and so we'll reduce it or we'll stop it. But we know very well that it's actually not that easy. And that's because there's a very complex but important interplay between the environmental pillar, the social pillar, and the economic pillar. So I suppose in relation to water governance, the OECD have stated that, I suppose, dealing with existing challenges, but in particular future challenges in water governance, we will need multi-stakeholder solutions. And the OECD have also stated that engaging with stakeholders, so they are the interested parties in water, in the early stages of decision making, it's critical to foster an understanding of, say, firstly, the environmental problems, but also to promote acceptance and buy-in to any new plans. Even the Water Framework Directive calls for active involvement of all interested parties for the implementation of the Water Framework Directive. So that's why the Water Forum exists. We're the national stakeholder body to bring together the national stakeholders of water. So it was kind of set up by the government to facilitate this stakeholder input into water policy development and into water management. So we have an independent chair, and otherwise we have 26 members, and the 26 members represent 16 different sectors. So you can see the different sectors on the slide. The idea, I suppose, is to bring together all of these different perspectives, the different interests, often conflicting interests in water. I suppose, firstly, to learn about the challenges, about the different perspectives, because we can see then what might be, I suppose, a barrier for implementing a certain measure. But then the next step is that, well, we can think, are there steps, are there things that we all agree could be something we could do for water? You may have realised or noticed that many of the members that are here in the room are often the ones putting up the arm for the Q&A. That's not trying to be difficult or put anybody under pressure. It's because the forum is very used to receiving presentations, receiving briefings, and we've regular, I suppose, very in-depth Q&As to try and, I suppose, build our understanding and our knowledge on a particular topic. So I guess the forum brings together that social, environment and economic pillars, but at the same time we have a common vision. And the forum's vision is for clean and healthy and that waters are clean and healthy and life enhancing, supporting biodiversity and providing the basis for community well-being and economic sustainability. So I suppose just before I get into the science part, we do have a statutory advisory role, and it's set out in the Water Services Act. The first one is that we have to advise the Minister in relation to government water policy, including water conservation, rural water services and the interests of Uisce Éireann customers. We have a role to advise Uisce Éireann on the performance of its functions. We have a role to advise the CRU in relation to the performance of Uisce Éireann. We have an advisory role to the Water Policy Advisory Committee, and that's in relation to the River Basin Management Plan and the implementation of the Water Framework Directive. And then finally, the Act states that we can examine other water-related matters, including carrying out of research to support us to provide advice to the Minister. I'm not going to get into our strategic goals, but the rest of the presentation now is going to focus on one, and that's our third strategic goal, and that's basically to bring scientific recommendations to policy through analysis, dialogue, and sense-making. So we have a research budget. It's an annual research budget. It's minute relative to the likes of the EPA, but we don't do primary research. So we actually look for experts they're already experts in a particular topic, and we want them to focus their expertise on policy. While we do a research report as part of our calls, the most important thing is a policy brief, and where we want the academics or the researchers to kind of bring their scientific knowledge and expertise into clear policy recommendations. That's not as easy as it sounds. And that's because academics, and I used to be one myself, are surrounded by academics. We tend to talk a lot, very scientifically, and we write scientific papers. And often we don't spend enough time, I suppose, in taking that next step about communicating the science to the policymakers if we actually want some change or it to influence policy. So all of our research projects are very clear. They have clear objectives that are linked to policy advice. How we decide on our research projects, so as we have an annual budget, we talk with the members at the start of the year, and we decide on a number, maybe 2 to 3 research projects. They're always aligned with our statutory advisory role. We may decide we would like some research to support us to respond to a policy consultation. We may have decided we want to develop a policy position. So we have developed positions, for example, on water conservation, on rural water, and we'd like to seek external expertise to, I suppose, support the forum and build that knowledge before we finalise a position. Or maybe members have identified that there's a gap in knowledge or a gap in policy and we want to explore that. So all of our research projects are available on our website. Like I said, we've both research reports, which are the full kind of more scientific, longer papers, but we also have our policy briefs. I'm going to just look at the top 3 as examples today about how we, I suppose, decided on it, how the research has kind of helped us to develop positions, and maybe where we have had some impact on policy. But we do have other ones like public participation in water management, invasive alien species, and the policy needs there. And we've done some national surveys kind of trying to gauge the public's maybe awareness on water issues, or their, I guess, what they think about, say, customer communications if they're a public water consumer. So I'll give you the first case study, and that's on water conservation. It is, I suppose, aligned with the Water Framework Directive in that it's part of sustainably managing water. We heard yesterday many of the challenges. So Angela from Uisce Éireann had, I suppose, given us an idea of the challenges Uisce Éireann have with the progress that they're making. But we do have serious existing supply-demand deficits. So over half of our water resource zones have a deficit in the amount of water that relative to the demand for an area. We've very high leakage rates, and while we're making some progress and it is coming down, it's still very slow and still a problem. As Conor Quinlan said yesterday, the population in Ireland is growing faster than earlier projections. And so even planning of our infrastructure, which has been done years ago, wasn't expecting the population that we have now. And you heard Angela saying that the infrastructure is really only built in Ireland for 3.5 million, and we're considerably above that. There's also a big increase for non-domestic water demand. And then, of course, we've got the impacts of climate change, which we heard a lot about yesterday. So I suppose in relation to water availability, the likelihood of increased dry and drought conditions will cause us problems at times of year when there isn't as much water to take from the environment. So I suppose building on that then, we have a statutory role in water conservation. The first project was done in 2021 where we wanted to know, okay, in the situation that we're in Ireland, we'll accept for now we don't have to pay for water. So what can we do? How can we improve water efficiency and water conservation in the home? And so we wanted to know internationally what's happening elsewhere. Can we take learnings from the international best practice? So Sarah Cottrell from UCD led this project. She looked at where water has been used in the home, and she drew on all the, I suppose, learnings from international case studies. And she presented 10 key policy recommendations. I won't go through them all, but I suppose ones that the forum have then taken, I suppose, to try and kind of impact policy is one of them was that she recommended for the need to update building regulations to specify water use at building scale. She recommended that water conservation team should be established, and that's to help, I suppose, drive conservation at national level. She highlighted the need for better education because people don't understand, I suppose, and we did a survey and we asked the public, they don't get that water is taken from the natural environment and the amount of energy and resources that are used to treat water and get it to your home. And so there's definitely an educational piece there. And finally, she recommended that we could better work together and maybe have some workshops to kind of think about different ways that we could improve conservation. So the forum actually held 2 separate workshops. One where we wanted to look at the building regulations and water labelling, and we had, of course, Water Forum members, but also representatives here that are listed on the left: Uisce Éireann, Water Policy, Building Regs from the Department of Housing, the National Federation of Group Water Schemes, the Irish Green and Building Council. We had a really good presentation from DEFRA in the UK, because in fact they're actually quite advanced in relation to the top-down or government initiative to drive water conservation in the UK. But we also looked at education and awareness and had some really nice learnings from a workshop. So I suppose taking all of that in then, the research, the workshops, multiple presentations and discussions, the Water Forum developed then a policy position. There's a number of recommendations, but I've just highlighted three. One is that we have recommended for a committed government strategy on water conservation. We've also recommended for the establishment of a national water conservation team to develop first that strategy, but then to implement it. We've also said that building regulations should be revised, because our homes should not only be energy efficient, they should also be water efficient. We presented the position to Minister O'Brien and Minister Noonan in 2023. It was actually a really positive engagement. But what we did get from this meeting and from the workshop we had on building regs is that we're in a situation where we have a housing crisis. It's very expensive to build houses. We can't add another layer of complexity, basically, to changing building regulations and thinking about water use. So then we did another piece of research, which was done last year, where we wanted to know how much actually would it cost to build a house that's water efficient. Are there easy ways of making some savings? And then how much would it cost to make the bigger water savings, like rainwater harvesting or grey water reuse? And this was carried out by John Gallagher and Lawrence Gill from Trinity. And they took the cost, how much it costs to make a litre of drinking water, how much it costs to treat a litre of wastewater, and then the costs of all the different type of water efficiency stuff. One of the key findings is that simply by using efficient taps, showers and toilets can save 20 litres per person per day. And actually, these taps, showers and toilets only cost about €180. So that's small money in the scheme of building a new house. And we're not asking for any behavioural change. So everything the same, just efficient taps, showers and toilets put into the house when it's built. If you just look at the 303,000 new homes that are expected or are being planned to be built under the housing targets, this could save 2.2 million metres cubed of water annually, just from that, 20 litres per person per day. Saving €9.7 million in state costs for water and wastewater. So obviously that's via Uisce Éireann. So there are some possibilities that we could think about for making water more efficient. So I suppose then the impact on policy, we were very pleased that last year the Department of Housing's The Water Services Policy Statement has a commitment to set up a national water conservation working group to advise the Minister on future strategy for water conservation and prioritising of resources during periods of water stress. And the first meeting of that team is due next week. So it was a kind of a good example of, I suppose, the forum and statutory role, bringing in the expertise, having lots of, bringing different stakeholders together, and then actually influencing policies. So it's a good example for us. I have two much shorter examples, and one is on climate change. So we heard yesterday there's many impacts that we'll likely see in Ireland in relation to too much water, too little water, or the impacts on our water quality. So in 2022, we did two research projects, one led by Fiachra O'Loughlin looking at climate change impacts on water quantity, and the other was looking at climate change impacts on water quality. And we brought that all together just to see, can we make policy recommendations? We had really good presentations of the research to members of the forum. And then we have since developed a number of recommendations which we have circulated. We developed a position which I presented for the forum to the Climate Change Advisory Council and also to the local authority climate officers and to CARO to, I suppose, make recommendations for the local authority climate action plans. The types of things that we were saying there is that water conservation should be used as a tool for climate change adaptation. So we need to be able to adapt to those times of lower water availability. We have recommended that climate change adaptation planning should be done at catchment scale, because when you look at the catchments, and this was in Fiachra's report on water quantity, it's not going to respond the same across the country. You're going to have areas that will be worst impacted by flood or worst impacted by drought, and so we need to start adapting a catchment scale where we have available data. We have recommended the need for drought management plans. So we have a big focus in Ireland on flood, but we need to bring in the drought management as well. We've recommended that climate, water and biodiversity policy should be better aligned and more coherent, and that action on the ground, including local authorities, should be aligned to prioritise and find those multiple benefits. We'd hope then that all of this research and I suppose previous positions will help us to develop a submission to the upcoming review of the climate sectoral adaptation plan for water quality and water services. So a very last example is in relation to private household wells. So like I said earlier, we have a statutory role in rural water. And it's quite a significant amount. So 10% of the population are connected to private wells. Unlike public water or group water schemes, it is actually the homeowners of the wells who are responsible for their supply maintenance, for their well testing, and for any treatment that may be required. But what we have seen is that the quality of drinking water from wells is actually considerably worse than public water or group water schemes. And so, and even one STEC, which is a type of E. coli, is 10 times, the notification rate is 10 times higher in Ireland than the average in Europe. And so, and this is strongly associated with well water. So we do need to think from a public health point of view if we should be providing more supports for private wells to kind of help them along and get water quality, and even look at the contamination and see can we prevent contamination of wells. So what the researchers here, and this was led by Paul Hines at TU Dublin, but also with Simon Mooney and Owen O'Neill from UCD, and they again looked at the international space. What can we learn from other countries? Are there places that they are offering good supports for private wells? One that really stood out in their report is from Ontario and Canada, which is quite a similar. You can compare it to Ireland to some extent, and they offer complete free testing to their private well owners, unlimited. So you could send one in every week if you wanted. But they found that did bring down so people then took ownership over their private wells. They took ownership over the need maybe to improve, look whether it's well maintenance or if there's a treatment required. To implement a similar program in Ireland, it would cost about 5.3 million euros annually, which is actually small in the scheme of public health. If you're looking at the cost of I suppose, admissions in relation to those who got quite sick from contaminated well water. The recommendations that they made is that there should be a similar well testing programme in Ireland, building on the model from Ontario and Canada. And they also they made recommendations on the need to expand awareness and knowledge on contamination prevention, and that would be through targeted campaigns. So just through a presentation to members, the forum have, I suppose, supported firstly recommended the need for better supports for private wells, supported the concept of well testing, but very much acknowledged there's a lot of figuring out to do. And looking at it in the context of Ireland, we already have a grant, so you would just need to see how that would kind of influence the actual cost, is if there was a lot more requests for grant drawdown. But we have suggested that there should be a series of workshops where we can tease out some of the policy recommendations. So just to conclude, I guess science and policy can be seen as different worlds, but I think when you look at all the presentations, when they are brought together, it could certainly help deal with some of the water governance and issues that we are facing. The Water Forum provides a platform for stakeholder engagement on water policy and management of water resources, but we also provided that bridge between science and policy to support sustainable water management in Ireland. And I just would like to finally just thank the members of the Water Forum who have given their time and their commitment to delivering the forum's vision for clean and healthy waters. Thank you.